are these people?
So, John Kiriakou, Collin, we've had him on the show before. Well, not had him. We've had his articles on the show.
Not personally yet. We're working on that, but we should work on that.
Yeah.
He's DC, so.
So he wants to write specifically about Lucas Bellamy and Brandon Clay Dotson. Any of those names ring a bell to you, Care Bear? So they show how easy it is to die a medically preventable death in U.S. prisons. So that's where we start. Yay, fun prison stuff. The suffering of our peoples. So Kiriakou writes, I've had a rough week. Last Saturday, I worked all day writing and gathering documents for a court case. It was completely normal and uneventful day, and I went to bed at 10 o'clock. At 2:05 a.m., my phone alarm went off to tell me that my blood sugar was too low, so I got up to get something to eat. I don't remember getting downstairs, but I woke up half an hour later, lying on the kitchen floor after having passed out. I was soaked in sweat as if I had taken a shower with my clothes on. I have two housemates and I began calling for help. Unfortunately, nobody heard me. I tried pulling myself up, but I passed out again. I woke up at 3:30 in the same place and began calling for help. This time, one of my housemates heard me. He came down, helped me onto the couch, and got me a soda to raise my blood sugar level. But that turned out to not be the problem. When my blood sugar crashes, it only takes 5 minutes to right itself. This was going into the second hour. After yet another hour on the couch, I asked him to help me get back into bed, but as soon as I tried to get up, I passed out again. He called 911. I have no memory of being taken to the Virginia Hospital Center in Arlington. The only thing I recall is a fleeting memory of a doctor shouting my name and saying, John, can you hear me? We're taking you straight into surgery, okay? I mumbled, okay. I came out of it at 10:30 a.m. The surgeon and the internal medicine physician came to see me later in the day. They said I had a massive blood clot on my esophagus sitting on top of my equally massive bleeding ulcer. It had apparently been caused by 18 years of daily baby aspirin. I had a second surgery on Tuesday to remove a second clot and to laser the ulcer, and I came home on Wednesday after having 3 blood transfusions and 3 infusions of iron. It was the closest I have ever come to death, and I have my housemates to thank for literally saving my life.
Wow.
So that was Kiriakou's story. But he wanted to relate it to another story of someone not so lucky. So Kiriakou reiterates that he was lucky, but what would have happened to someone in a similar circumstance in prison, where nobody cares if you live or die, and where medical care varies from substandard to non-existent? I think the answer is an easy one. Look at the case of Lucas Bellamy. He had been arrested in Minnesota on suspicion of vehicle theft. Immediately before the arrest, he ate a bag of drugs in an effort to fool police into thinking that he didn't have any. But he immediately began feeling sick. Jail officers took him to a local hospital where he was treated. The doctor there told the jailers to return him to the hospital if he became ill again. Bellamy never showed any improvement, and indeed he began vomiting as soon as he got back to his cell. By evening, he was refusing food and crawling around his cell as a guard and nurse stood and watched him. By noon the next day, he was dead on the floor. So here's CBS News Minnesota. Family sues Hennepin County Jail over Lucas Bellamy's death, saying he begged for medical care. So there he literally is on his knees, begging. Right. So whistleblower reality winner had a health-related experience that made her appreciate exactly where she stood with prison officials. Realizing that she had contracted COVID-19, she informed a guard and said she thought she should be isolated. The guard's response was simple and direct. Winner, he said, nobody gives a shit about you. That's the reality of the American prison system. The case of Brandon Clay Dotson is even worse. Dotson was arrested on a burglary charge and was being held in the local jail in Clayton, Alabama. He told a guard that several other prisoners had been beating him, and he asked to be moved into segregated housing for his own protection. He later told the guards in solitary that he wasn't feeling well, but they ignored him. And a day after that, the 43-year-old was found dead in his bed. Prison officials sent Dodson's body to the Barber County, Alabama coroner, who later sent it to the University of Alabama Medical Center. It was finally returned to his family, severely decomposed, 3 weeks later. And as if it weren't bad enough,
what?
Brandon Dodson's heart was missing.
That's negligence right there. Like,
mm-hmm.
Like, if he was in that hot, well, if he was in the, well, so he went to the medical center. They had to do the autopsy.
Yeah.
So basically, they mishandled him. Guessing because he was in jail, they basically mishandled him and just didn't give him the care or whatever.
No one would
and they
care.
were just like, whatever. Right. So fun fact: I'm a Undertaker's son, so I do know like some of this.
Yeah.
But essentially, like first of all, it doesn't take that long for your body to decompose. Like it takes, I think, roughly like about 2 weeks, assuming that like you're not kept in like refrigeration or whatever. Like if you're just exposed, like you start decomposing immediately, but you start decomposing to the point where it's actually noticeable, I believe, within 2 weeks. If you just died on the floor in your house.
Yeah.
So this kind of says to me that when he got to the coroner slot, they didn't put him in refrigeration to kind of slow down the decomposition. So they just had him out. I think they probably just did the motions of doing an autopsy on him and didn't, and like, not to say like when they check your internal organs, just as a way to kind of see cause of death. But then when they're done, if you don't donate them, or if they don't donate them to research, they'll put them back in. They don't necessarily have to put them in the same place, but at least close enough so that they're in there.
Yeah. Like the turkey giblets. You just put them back in a bag.
Exactly.
And you put them back in. So that you can make gravy later.
Right.
But
so so all of that to say, there was extreme mishandlement and lack of care in this guy's death. So just to kind of give some context of like, what's the big deal? The big deal is like his body should not have been severely decomposed if he went to a coroner/medical center. That your body should be technically kept in refrigeration.
Yeah, right. So it's probably too much to expect things to turn around. Oh, sorry. The family has filed a federal lawsuit against the jail, the coroner, and the University of the Alabama Medical Center, but nobody seems to know what happened to the errant organ. My guess is that they'll never find it. The bottom line is, as Reality Winner was told, nobody gives a shit.
Right.
Excuse me. It's probably too much to expect things to turn around, but just a few months ago, in a 140-page ruling, a federal judge in Louisiana ruled against the administrators of Louisiana State Penitentiary at Angola. Collin, I've mentioned Angola to you before.
You have.
So, Angola prisoners are part of a hidden workforce linked to hundreds of popular food brands. So, Angola is New Orleans State Penitentiary, is the way people think about it, right? So, it is a plantation. Like, I couldn't literally be more literal. It is a plantation. So, we will get into it. A hidden path to America's dinner tables begin here at an unlikely source, a former southern slave plantation that is now the country's largest maximum security prison.
I mean, from
Signed, sealed.
I mean it makes sense. Hate saying it in that way, but it makes sense.
Yep.
To go from a plantation to a prison.
Unmarked trucks packed with prison-raised cattle roll out of Louisiana State Penitentiary, where men are sentenced to hard labor and forced to work for pennies an hour, or sometimes nothing at all. What's that called, Collin?
What's that?
Well, if you're working for nothing at all?
Oh, slavery.
Yeah, or unpaid internship.
Right.
But
that's a nice way of saying it.
Right.
That's the liberal way of saying it.
Exactly.
That's what the new history books that don't want to talk about slavery are going to say now. They got like black people got unpaid internships.
Right. Yep. So after rumbling down a country road to an auction house, the cows are bought by a local rancher and then followed by the Associated Press another 600 miles to a Texas slaughterhouse that feeds into the supply chains of giants like McDonald's, Walmart, and Cargill. So, here it is, right? Intricate, invisible webs, just like this one. Like some of the world's largest food companies and most popular brands, to jobs performed by U.S. prisoners nationwide, according to a sweeping 2-year AP investigation into prison labor that tied hundreds of millions of dollars worth of agricultural products to goods sold on the open market. So they are among America's most vulnerable laborers. If they refuse to work, some can jeopardize their chances of parole or face punishment, like being sent to solitary. They also are often excluded from protections guaranteed in almost all other full-time workers, even when they are seriously injured or killed on the job. The goods these prisoners produce wind up in the supply chains of dizzying array of products found in most American kitchens, from Frosted Flakes cereal and ballpark hot dogs to Gold Medal flour, Coca-Cola, and Riceland rice. They are on the shelves of virtually every supermarket in the country, including Kroger, Target, Aldi, and Whole Foods, and some goods are exported, including to countries that have products blocked from entering the U.S. for using forced or prison labor. Many of the companies buying directly from prisons are violating their own policies against the use of such labor, but it's completely legal, dating back largely to the need for labor to help rebuild the South's shattered economy after the Civil War. Enshrined in the Constitution by the 13th Amendment, slavery and involuntary servitude are banned, except for punishment as a crime. That clause is currently being challenged on the federal level, and efforts to remove similar language from state constitutions are expected to reach the ballot in about a dozen states this year. So, some prisoners work on the same plantation soil where slaves harvested cotton, tobacco, and sugarcane more than 150 years ago, when some present-day images looking eerily similar to the past. In Louisiana, which has one of the country's highest incarceration rates, men working on the farm line will stoop over crops stretching far into the distance. Willie Ingram picked everything from cotton to okra during his 51 years in the state penitentiary, better known as Angola. During his time in the fields, he was overseen by armed guards on horseback and recalled seeing men working with little or no water, passing out in triple-digit heat. Some days, he said, workers would throw their tools in the air to protest despite knowing the potential consequences. They'd come, maybe 4 in the truck, shields over their face, billy clubs, and they'd beat you right there in the field. They beat you, handcuff you, and beat you again, said Ingram, who received a life sentence after pleading guilty to a crime he said he didn't commit. He was told he would serve 10.5 years and avoid a possible death penalty, but it wasn't until 2021 that a sympathetic judge finally released him. He was 73. So, yeah. Meanwhile, on the federal level, Senators Dick Durbin and Chuck Grassley tasked the Justice Department's Bureau of Prisons with fixing what they called a medical system that has allowed people in its care to die preventable deaths. This came after NPR reported that just at the federal level, 4,950 prisoners had died of preventable illness while in custody in the past 10 years. In a statement, Durbin said, "It is deeply upsetting that families are mourning the loss of their loved ones because they were not afforded the proper medical care they deserved while incarcerated." Grassley added, "I'm deeply alarmed by reports that the Bureau of Prisons has demonstrated foot dragging when it comes to providing medical care to those in its custody. The BOP needs to be held responsible for this failure and take action to raise its standards." Durbin and Grassley are right, of course, but a press statement isn't going to change anything. The problem is prevalent at every level of government and is exacerbated by a national penchant for prioritizing the privatization of jails and prisons. What better way to make profit than to cut medical care? In the meantime, prisoners across the country have to try to fend for themselves, and when disaster strikes, they have to hope that somebody gives a shit. Thoughts, Care Bear?
Yeah, I have a thought. I kind of have a story. So when I went to Barbados to visit my dad 2 summers ago, he actually had a client meet up with him when he was there that we spoke to for several hours. Essentially, they wanted to do a funeral for, I believe it was the woman's brother, if I remember correctly. Long story short, he died. He lived alone. He died in his apartment in London, and his body wasn't discovered. I think it was either weeks or months. Like, and the only reason why they figured out that he died was because obviously his body was decomposing to the point where it was starting sticking up other apartments. So they called the police, and the police, had to knock down the door and found that he was dead. So they had to take care of his brother's body, So,
Right.
but the idea he kind of died alone with nobody, and he had family, but he just died alone in his apartment, and nobody knew for months or cared about him for months to, what happened to him. Like, I live alone, and actually that's kind of one of my fears. If something happened to me, would I be taken care of? Not even necessarily in death, but like if I got into a major accident, like who would take care of me? That's
Well,
definitely something.
if you get a cat, the cat will at least eat you before people get there. So,
Right, but see, I'm allergic to cats and I don't want a pet. So what
oh
am I gonna
yeah,
do?
I mean that's why they're
But
convenient.
right, but kind of going along with this, and I think what John Kiriakou was saying is like, actually now that I'm asking, like, how old is he? Like, he must be young then. Not necessarily like would assume he was older, but he was like living with roommate, or at least it may have been sometime a story he was mentioning in the past. But
Yeah.
regardless, um, he's fortunate to have roommates that was able to kind of turn to, like when he had his his medical issue. But and jail aside, just like just the lack of care, and I think this kind of speaks to where we're at now in terms of how isolated we are now, just generally as society. And we kind of keep to ourselves, even like on the same street, like I don't even look, I have my neighbors who I live above me. I know them, but I haven't hung out with them.
Right.
They are cool enough guys. There's a group of 4 of them that live upstairs from me, but I don't hang out with them. I don't know them, and I don't know anybody in on my street, you know, at all.
Right.
And I think this just kind of speaks to a larger issue in our society now, where we're just kind of isolating ourselves. We don't know our neighbors. We don't know the people who live around us. And if something happens to you, it's basically the idea of like you're on your own.
Right.
So I, but I think just the idea of like if you're a person of color in the jail system, just the disregard that they will give you in terms of using you. And this is not new. Like, this is what Kamala Harris, you know, like, that's why people hate her, because she promoted
incarcerated
shit
people,
like this.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Shit like this. So, like, this is why the Black community hates her guts, among other things, you know. But the idea that, even granted, you're in jail, like, you're living out your sentence, like, at minimum, there should be some type of respect in terms of you being human. Yeah, granted, whatever you did, but there should be some level of basic care that you should be giving to, you know, prisoners who are in the penitentiary system. But, you know, but unfortunately, if you're a person of color, as they said, they deem you just worthless and just useless, and, like, you know, they don't care if you're, like, if you die or whatever on the floor, you know.
Yeah.
Like, you're just seen as subhuman, which, uh, it scares me, you know, like, in that instance. But I think it scares me more, like, that doesn't have to happen in jail. That can just happen to anybody at any given time, just living life.
Well, we know who teaches our justice system how to justice. So, you know. Anyway, let us know what you think. Leave a comment. Do all the stuff. Share. It's easy. Send this to your friend. Copy the link. Send it. Put it in a carrier pigeon. You know, pop it over there. Help us get to 2K. We're getting there. Hit that big subscribe button.